Hi, I'm a former higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I am actually really grateful that I am not having to communicate to a campus during these really fraught political times. I am so glad to be on the outside where I can be more vocal about my opinions, but also where I can guide and help leaders navigate these really tricky conversations. But there are people who are doing the real work of communicating these messages with empathy and with care and in ways that support the missions of their institutions. And one of those people is my very good friend, Jen Brock. Jen is the Vice President for Marketing and Communications at Mount Holyoke College, which is a trailblazing institution that champions gender diversity and women's leadership. And you can see why that might be a little bit tricky in these times. Jen has dedicated her entire career to advancing mission-driven institutions through inclusive strategic storytelling. She has held communications leadership roles in higher education and in both public and private K-12 schools. Deeply committed to equity and education, Jen frequently presents about her family's experiences in the Japanese American incarceration camps during World War II. I think there's a lot to get out of this episode, and I hope you enjoy it. You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast where marketing minds in higher ed come to pull back the curtain, spill a little tea, and talk honestly about what it takes to market in this industry. I'm Jaime Hunt, the founder of Solve Higher Ed, author of Heart Over Hype, and a former campus CMO who spent more than 2 decades navigating the weird, wonderful world of higher education marketing. This show is for the strategists, the storytellers, the change agents, and anyone who has ever tried to get Faculty Senate on board with a rebrand. Here we get candid about the challenges and share the ideas that are shaping the future of our field. Sound like your kind of conversation? Then let's get into it. Hey, Jen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jamie, it's nice to be here with you.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I am wearing, listeners, you can't see, in honor of this topic, a Woman Up t-shirt that I wore on my walk this morning. And I always forget when I'm wearing it, people like give me looks. And some of them are like, heck yeah. And some of them are like kind of scowly little looks. And I never remember why. I'm like, why are these people looking at me like that? But I'm wearing it in honor of talking to you about women's colleges, which you work at one. You're the vice president at Mount Holyoke College, but you're also a product of women's colleges, right?
Yes. So I am a very proud graduate of Randolph-Macon Women's College, which sadly no longer exists as a women's college. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, there were around 230 women's colleges. Now there's about 29 or 30. And my alma mater is one of the ones that is no longer a women's college, but it was when I attended, and it made me who I am. A lot of my successes come from that base in undergrad. And so now I get to serve a women's college, which ironically was my first choice of school. But back when I was young, I grew up in Southern California, and Western Massachusetts seemed like the tundra and the winter scared me. So I chose a school in Virginia, which was a slightly more temperate climate. So this is like my redemption tour to get to go to Mount Holyoke again.
I love it. And Mount Holyoke, remind listeners where it is in the U.S.
So Western Massachusetts, so South Hadley, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours west of Boston. So we're actually closer to Vermont. We're about 45 minutes south of the Vermont line, 30 minutes north of Connecticut. So it's a little corner. It's absolutely beautiful. Beautiful, like not at all a city. We're actually in a very rural area, which surprises some people. But we sit in an area where there's about 5 colleges within 15 minutes of each other. So it's really just like a great kind of epicenter of higher education in this gorgeous, beautiful Western Massachusetts landscape.
It was gorgeous, listeners. I went there in January of 25, and it's rolling hills and trees and farmland and just this idyllic place. And as somebody who's leading Marcom at a women's college, I would also like to kind of touch on the idea of women's colleges that embrace gender diversity and kind of what that means from your perspective.
So for us, it means that we have one of the most inclusive admissions policies in the nation. We are first and foremost a women's college at our heart, right? We were founded in 1837 by a woman who questioned that accepted idea that women should not be educated. That was a radical idea back then. She literally went door to door with a little velvet pouch that we still have, and she collected coins and donations to start a school because she believed that women should have a right to education. We often say we were forged in dissent, the dissent that women should not have that right. We're still dissenting, right? All these years later. What it looks like now is that we embrace gender diversity, right? We don't recognize that there's a binary of students who come to us. We have an inclusive policy that welcomes transgender students, non-binary students, gender non-conforming students. But we are at our heart still a women's college. That's how we were founded. That's how we will stay. And we want to be a place of, intellectual adventure for anyone who's been marginalized, who has not had that access to education. Maybe it looks a little different now than it did in 1837, but Mount Holyoke remains really proud and really strong in being a place of learning that doesn't say, no, you don't belong here.
I just think it's so necessary, especially in 2025. But you're really at the intersection of two critical things that are happening in this country right now. Both higher education and gender inclusivity are sort of in the crosshairs, to use a very violent term. And how are you framing Mount Holyoke's story in that really charged environment?
We lead with mission, right? That's what it always comes down to. If you look at our mission statement, it literally starts with the leading gender diverse women's college. That's who we are. So we will often ask ourselves, is this Mount Holyoke? What does this mean for the college? We honestly don't make decisions based on politics. Politics come and go, trends come and go, political climates, donor climates, all of that is really kind of evolving and it changes. And what remains for us is that mission. We put Mount Holyoke first. I think that it's a really great litmus test, right? You look back to what is at your core, and at our core is who we are as an institution and what we believe. And when you have that mission sort of driving everything you do, the rest is important. It's also sometimes just chatter. And if you work through that chatter and you were always mission driven, mission led, is this where Mount Holyoke needs to be? Is this who Mount Holyoke is? What does Mount Holyoke do in this moment? Those answers become a lot clearer.
Do you find tension between those values and potentially donor conflict, or any other sort of political risk that you might face by staying true to those values?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's tensions. I think it's funny. Tensions and conflicts come up a lot, right? People will always ask us, like, how do you navigate all these differences of opinion? I'll be super candid. We don't expect everyone to agree with us all the time. That's not what civil discourse looks like. We have an intergroup dialogue center, right? We welcome disagreement, engagement on, like, how do you feel about this? What does this look like for you? You can't be around since 1837 and not have some of those conversations, right? That's a lot of decades of change, both for an institution and the world around us. We have donors, we have alums who have seen the college shift and evolve and change, and maybe in ways that they're not always immediately comfortable with, right? The world looks different now. The term gender diversity wasn't even commonplace, right? Not even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, talk about 50 years ago. That's an alum who had a very different experience. But the core of it is Mount Holyoke, right? And they understand that we lead with meaningful intention on what's best for the college and what our place is in the world. Our students are our priority, right? Higher education, liberal arts education is our priority. I think sometimes when there's tension, it's just in a, let me tell you more about that. Let's talk through why this is still your college, or why this is still a place that you can believe in, that is still here for you. And the policies may look a little different. The student population may look a little different than what you saw when you were on campus every single day. But there's so many common threads that run through it. And you can still find your Mount Holyoke, right? There's 40,000 alums, there's 40,000 Mount Holyokes, and there will be 40,000 more as time goes on. I think in terms of, politics and questions of where does our mission sit at a time when there are a lot of threats, a lot of questions and skepticism about the place of higher education, place of women's education, what gender diversity even means to some people. We stand behind who we are, and you can't deny the students we have on campus. You can't deny the incredible, beautiful outcomes of our alums, the work our faculty and staff are doing. So the proof is kind of literally in the pudding, right? It's what you see in front of you. And I will often tell alums, like, for every story that you might not understand that's happening right now, there's one that you do understand. And you have to just give yourself a chance to find that nugget, that story that clicks with you. It's why we love alum engagement so much, because sometimes they are as surprised as our current students with what they actually have in common and where they can kind of meet in the middle and say, like, oh, I know exactly what that means. The circumstances were different, the situation may have been different, but there's a common thread of kind of, what it means to be a Mount Holyoke student then and now.
I'm guessing that you talk about what it means to be a Mount Holyoke student with your students. Like it feels like the sort of stew of Mount Holyoke is building a Mount Holyoke woman or a Mount Holyoke alum.
That forge and descent line, right? We talk about being bold and boundless. I know one of the things that you've asked me is, what does it mean to be clear and outspoken? We only know how to be clear and outspoken. And I realize that sounds like a marketing tagline. It really is not. We encourage and empower those in our community, right? Our students, our alums, our faculty and staff to find and use their voices. As someone who works in marketing communications, I know you understand this. That's beautiful. It's also exhausting sometimes because all of those voices want to be heard, right? Deserve to be heard, and at times demand to be heard. But it is a common thread, right? When you encourage someone to find their voice, to use it for good, to use it for change, to speak up in a space where maybe you're not being asked to speak up or that you have traditionally not been allowed to speak up, there's a unity in that whether you graduated in 1954, 1984, 2024, right? Someone encouraging you and empowering you to use your voice is a common thread that's not going to go away. At its core, Mount Holyoke is about, let's help you find your voice and then encourage you to use it in however that may look to you after you leave us.
I feel like a women's college would have been a really good place for me as someone who ended up at the time, it was the largest and then second largest university in the country. And I was a commuter student and I was shy and reserved. Ironically, I found my voice while working at an HBCU. And I think it is because it's similar to women's colleges. It's
Yes.
about empowering and building that confidence and cultivating the leadership of people who have been historically kept quiet. So, I think there's a lot of overlap in how HBCUs and women's colleges serve the world and how important they are.
We both have a commitment to making sure that those marginalized, underrepresented voices, opinions, gifts, and talents are all nurtured, right? They're all encouraged. And sometimes I think it's even taking a chance on people, not saying, oh, well, this is what we know is going to happen. We don't often know. I tell our students now, we're helping them prepare for jobs that don't even exist yet, right? The same way that at a time, a Mount Holyoke, a Spelman College, right? Any institution that kind of says, we're not just here for the norm, for the masses. We recognize that there are people who don't have that equity, right? It's not as simple as saying, yes, you can apply. For a first generation student, for someone who doesn't come from a strong college prep background, it's daunting. The FAFSA form is daunting. Looking at thousands of colleges and trying to figure out where you might belong is really difficult. And to come with the assumption that we know what that experience is like does a disservice to every student, right? College can be for everyone. It sounds really, really trite and colloquial, right? But there are so many colleges. Mount Holyoke's not for everyone. We don't expect to be, we don't intend to be. But for those who belong with us, there's a incredible transformation that happens, right? I think if you look at women's college, you aren't the first person who says to me, I wish I had gone to a women's college. I have a number of friends and colleagues who've said that, and they are usually in two camps, or either somebody who was a little shyer, maybe didn't feel like they were given that voice early in life, or they were super outspoken and in college kind of had to stifle it back a little bit, right? Because they were in classrooms where maybe it wasn't appreciated. They were the loud, outspoken one. Both of those people tend to thrive at a women's college, right? At an HBCU, when you are told, like, yes, your voice matters. Not that you have to fight for it or you have to convince someone to let you speak up or you're wondering when your time comes. Like when you step foot on Mount Holyoke, it's your time. this is the 4 years of your time, and then you leave us and it is still your time. There's a reason that we have, the most grads in like life sciences and PhDs. If you look at boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, there's a lot of women's college grads who are leading those companies. Once you get your voice used, you don't want to give it back up. And there's a reason, I'm highly opinionated, right? And I will talk about a lot of things I learned at a women's college. Speak up, and you talk because you deserve to, not because you're being given a turn, not because someone says, oh, like now let's hear from this person. You grab the microphone and you say what matters and you say what's meaningful. And I think that's what Mount Holyoke has done since 1837. It's why we're so outspoken now. We are not going to stop being who we are just because somebody else maybe says you ought not to say that.
Or do you think there's things in that ethos that institutions that aren't specialized women colleges or HBCUs or whatever can take away from that and apply to their institutions?
I mean, I think, we sit in a special spot of we're not dependent on federal funding, right? And that's something I recognize. We're not a public R1. There's a different level of pressure and scrutiny when a lot of your funding, a lot of your, operational base is tied up in a funding source that you don't have full control over. I think for, a bigger institution, for a public institution, you still have a mission, right? And your constituencies may look different. And I think you have a different lever from politics and from outside influences that you have to consider. But I think you would still want to stay true to what your institution believes and wants to be. I don't expect every one of my counterparts and colleagues, to do what Mount Holyoke is doing. It's unrealistic. It would not serve everyone well, right? We're in a different position. But I think if you stay true to who you are, whatever way you go, you have to believe in it, right? I mean, all the work we do is about branding, about values, about mission. If you don't see that as consistent, that's where the problems come, right? I mean, your mission may be entirely different from Mount Holyoke or from another small liberal arts college. It's still your mission. It's still, right, your North Star on what you're looking at. Do things match up to this? And I think where colleges and universities get in trouble is when they try to like shift that mission based upon, a changing tide, right? An evolving opinion. If your core isn't solid, what are you looking back to when things get tough? When you have these like deep institutional questions about where are we going to go with this, right? If your mission is like ever shifting, you don't have that solid base to go down and back and say, okay, this is what we're going to judge against. And I think that's where we get on really shaky ground.
I think that holds true whether the crisis is something to do with the current administration, whether it's some other crisis on your campus, some sort of scandal on your campus. I mean, I really think at the end of the day, pointing back to your values and your mission really help you navigate those situations in ways that allow you to come out of it stronger and allow you to feel more authentic and believable. Because I think if you're sort of taking a stance that is in conflict with that, people feel it and it feels gross. I mean, for me, it's kind of like I've boycotted Walmart for years, boycotted Hobby Lobby for years. I'm boycotting Target though, because I feel like it was a bait and switch. It was, they had stated values that they are now saying aren't their values. And I shopped with them because I believed they shared values with me. And so I think if you kind of do things that are in conflict with what everybody believed were your values, I think that's where you get that tension from your campus.
It's even beyond campus, right? That's where the alums, the friends, the supporters come in. Your messaging, your identity, your mission, those aren't chameleons. They shouldn't shift. There's unease in those shifting, right? When people think about you, if they don't know what you believe and how you live it out, it's hard for them to make a decision. And if you change it, to your point, then they're like, wait, like, what can I believe about you, right? There's that really famous quote by Maya Angelou about people will forget what you said and what you did, but they will not forget how you made them feel. I honestly disagree about that with higher ed marketing communications, because what we do and what we say as an institution directly affects how we make someone feel, right? And it all ties in together. You can't post something and then do something entirely different and not have someone say either it's hypocritical, they're not sure which one is correct, or they just don't trust you at all anymore because they can't tell from day to day, from decision to decision, from marketing message to marketing message, where actually you are, right? To me, it's all about kind of being on the right side of history for your institution. Now, that side may vary based on institution, but can you hold up what you're doing? Can you hold up your communications, hold up your marketing, hold up the things you are saying about yourself, the narratives you control, and say, yes, these are consistent to who we are as an institution, and we believe in them, even if people disagree, even if not everyone understands and says, yes, I'm on board with that. If it's consistent, they will at least respect that who you say you are is how you play that out. And that's kind of your saving grace in many situations, right? They can disagree with you. They can't question what you believe and who you are. For us, because it goes back to mission, that shapes everything we do. Someone may disagree with us. They may not like what we're saying. They may say, oh, well, I would have done it differently, or I would have not said anything. But they can't say that's not who you are. It's pretty clear who we are. We're unapologetic. We're also very consistent. This is who we are. I think it's it's the thread that has gone through the college for a really long time. It's heightened now because anytime you have threats to education, threats to women's colleges, questions about the value, the need, what we contribute, right? What we always go back to is like, we've been here for a very long time. We'll still be here for a very long time. And we'll be consistent in why we matter, why we're important, why we do what we do, and do it so proudly all the time, even if people don't understand and disagree.
I'm assuming your marketing is right up front with what to expect from the Mount Holyoke experience.
Yes. I mean, if you go to our website, we have a page that's literally called Forge and Descent that talks about kind of how we're speaking out. A lot of our admission materials talk about, we're often the most LGBTQ friendly campus. We have some of the most politically active students. We have one of the most active student governments, even though we're, a smaller size. We have alums who have won Pulitzer Prizes and are in STEM innovation and are leading on Wall Street, right? All of that is tied up into it. The common thing is kind of that, like, be bold, be outspoken, find where you want to go, right? I think a lot of our students come in a little overwhelmed, right? Those are high expectations to tell a 17 or 18-year-old, hey, you're going to make these amazing impacts on the world. Not everyone will. Some people are destined for great things that are on a smaller scale. And we don't want to diminish that, right? Or make them feel like they're less than the person who wins a Nobel Prize or whatever it is. But I think that, what we tell people is like, if you aren't sure exactly what you want to do, we're a great place to find that. If you have something kind of, at the back of your head, kind of nagging at you saying like, there's more I want to do with this, or I have this wild and crazy idea. And what could this look like? We have some of the most amazing and wacky double major combinations.
That's awesome.
Right? Because we don't say you have to be a physics major or an arts major. We say smash them together and let's throw you into our makerspace and see what happens, right? Give me the chemistry student who also wants to major in symphony orchestra, right? Give me the volleyball athlete who also wants to be in a science lab discovering something really obscure with genetics. Like, put those wild pairings together, add in a really cool internship because we have funded internships, and let's see what, that the high school student who felt like they had these very disconnected interests and loves and they could never really make them fit together. When they come to a Mount Holyoke, all of a sudden it all clicks in place. And you have faculty who are like, yes, let's combine those things. What's your wildest idea? And let's find a way to make it happen, right? We have an entire senior symposium where our students present their research. I have never felt so ignorant as when I sit in that room and see the connections they come up with, the ideas they have, where their brains go, right? Where their talents take them. And that to me is the beauty of liberal arts, right? Where you start, what you major in does not set that path for where you end up. The same way that where you find that voice your very first year doesn't mean that that's the only way that you are heard in the 4 years and then beyond, right? Part of higher ed is kind of figuring out what's possible. And a place like Mount Holyoke loves the what's possible. Like, what could this look like? We have no idea. Okay, let's go find out.
Oh my God, I love that so much. You're really reminding me of WSSU so much, and like the focus groups I would do, and students would say things like, my faculty members made me feel that my biggest dreams were the floor and that the ceiling was so far above, I couldn't even imagine what it was going to be. And they helped me get to a point where I felt like they were right. And it was like unlocking the potential in every single student and helping them see that whatever their dream is, to your point, being a nurse, being a school teacher, being a Nobel Prize, all of these things are equally valuable and really, really important. Whatever your dream is, you can accomplish that in an environment that's going to say, do it with your whole heart, do it boldly, do it bravely, just do it.
It's also try everything. Try things that you never, in high school, you were never the student who would have tried out for the play, right? Or been an admissions tour guide, or, did a stint on the radio station. Like, if that was like, oh, I always thought was interesting, the things our students get involved in, there's no rhyme or reason to it, right? We encourage them to kind of try a lot, and there's almost too much to do on our campus, so they're often bouncing from one thing to the next. I think the beauty in that is that this is when you can try, you can change your mind, you can fail. There's beauty in failure, right? Fail when you're a sophomore in college, and the biggest problem you have is like you had to maybe change your class schedule, right? Or you don't go to a club meeting anymore. And sometimes you find that like magic spot that you didn't even think you were going to like something, and it becomes something that you want to spend your life on.
Yeah.
I was asked, I had a student who asked me, like, what kinds of things would I do at Mount Holyoke? And I said, what I default to is what I did in college, right? I was a student tour guide. I worked in the museum. I wrote for the newspaper. And I think that those were safe for me. It was where I knew I was already kind of good at those things. I would hope that if I did it again, I would try something completely wild and wacky, just because why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the worst that will happen? You don't like it. Maybe you're not that great at it. And then you go and try something else. And I think higher ed, liberal arts, a women's college sort of says, like, this is a really safe space to try and fail and learn from it and figure out what that means for you. And maybe you find something entirely new. Maybe you create something entirely new, right? So many of our student organizations are student founded because they don't exist and somebody wants to do something, and then it becomes just like a normal part of the college, and we all move forward and kind of think, okay, we can't imagine when we didn't have that. Those are often the students who go on to innovating in entrepreneurism, because they have the ability to say, like, well, how come no one's doing this? Like, let's ask that question. But that's not unique to Mount Holyoke. I think what's unique to us is that that's really encouraged across the board, right? We're small enough to say, like, yes, we see you. You can come here and test it out and try it out. And we're big enough to say, here are all these resources that are at your disposal. Just take advantage of them.
Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 30 to 35% email open rates. The impact was personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to churn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. I feel like there's a narrative in here that's not just for Mount Holyoke or women's colleges, but that could sell the value of higher education more broadly, as we're moving into this sort of distrust of higher education and the idea of it as just a career preparation vehicle, for lack of a better word. There's we talk all the time about like, oh, it's the other stuff too. But I feel like you've just put narrative around what that other stuff is that you can explore and not just become what you planned to be when you were 16 or whatever, but to find and discover things that maybe you had no idea that you were good at or had an interest in. Think about, there's a woman I follow on TikTok who does trying every sport until I discover which one I can be an Olympian at. And I mean, it's kind of like try all these things
Right.
when you're 18, 19, 20, whatever. And you might have a whole life doing something that was never on your radar whatsoever. And that
I
can
think
lead you to
it's
building companies, to,
right.
doing things that are very much valued in our society.
I think, career readiness has become such a focus, right? I mean, it's a focus for Mount Holyoke. Like, what are those outcome stories, right? The outcomes are why. That's why you spend the 4 years. It's why you spend a lot of money and time investing in a college education. And it's just part of it, right? Part of career readiness isn't just getting a job. It's, can you work with other people? Can you function in those spaces? Can you lead in those spaces? Do you know how to have a difficult or uncomfortable conversation with someone who comes from a different background from you and be better for it after that conversation, right? Can you be giving a project that maybe feels a little scary to you or you're not sure what to do about it, and instead of go, okay, I have to quit my job now, or I have to, not do this, embrace a chance to try something different, right? And trust that you have the skills to use that critical thinking, to use kind of what you were given in undergrad and find a way forward from it. I think we discount sometimes that, yes, classroom instructional learning, it's the core of what we do, right? It is education at its base. The faculty are paramount to why colleges exist. And so much of what happens, so much of that learning is not just in a lab, from a textbook, from a lecture, right? It's that hallway conversation between a professor and a student where the professor says, if you thought about, you did an internship last year in a science lab. What if you intern next summer for writing for a science magazine, right? And stretch in that way. Or like, oh, I saw you, you play field hockey. That's great. My cousin's kid plays field hockey. They also work with the National Science Institute on so and so. Like, it's those interpersonal interactions. I think it's inspiration in the most unlikely places, right? It's walking into a dining hall and trying a food you've never had because your family didn't make it and maybe you're not Armenian. And so you would never have a chance to. But then fast forward 10 years in the future and you're in a client meeting and there's a restaurant that you've never been to before. You're not daunted, right? You can have conversations with people that you don't know. You can kind of compete, but also exist really well in what really is a global, right, community. We no longer grow up, move 5 miles away, get a job 10 miles away, and stay in the exact same network we've always had, right? We Zoom with people around the world. We get into meetings with people that we've never met before, and we have to make these critical decisions. We're given projects to work on that we don't even know what we're supposed to start with. I think college, higher education gives you the chance to say, like, okay, like it's daunting. It's not terrifying, right? It's not insurmountable. I can do this. I tried all these things in those 4 years. They didn't all work out, and I'm stronger and better for it. There's a resiliency and a grit, I think, that comes from especially a smaller liberal arts college, right? Where you do have that cushion to land on, but you're encouraged to kind of try and reach and stretch, knowing that you have that community supporting you, but also knowing that you have 4 years to make the most of what you can. And then that hopefully carries with you afterwards, where it's not just a 4 year stint, but you are given a chance to sort of say, like, what else could be? What else is possible? What doesn't exist yet? And how can I be a part of what that what if looks like?
And all important questions start with what if. I mean, I
Yes,
think innovation comes from what if we did this or that. And
right.
I think college gives you the resourcefulness to say, I may not know how to do this, but I can figure it out. Or I
Absolutely.
can find the resource that will either teach me how to do it, help me do it, or do it for me. And those are things where you have people who are sort of paralyzed by a conflict or paralyzed with an ask or an opportunity that they feel anxious about. And college just gives you the understanding that you don't have to have all the answers. There are
Yeah.
other people who have them who will help
There's
and
also, I
share
mean,
and
the
do
other
it.
side of what if is, what if we didn't do something?
Yeah.
Right? What if we stopped that? What if we said no? What if we, I mean, I think everyone always is, I think part of why our students and that age group get so overwhelmed is that the what ifs seem endless,
Mm-hmm.
right? We expect them to do everything, to take on every challenge, to change the world, to better the world. And sometimes it's well, what if we didn't try all of those things? Right? What if we said no? What if we scaled back? What if we were really deliberate and intentional? There's something really incredibly strong and powerful about limiting what you want to do and saying there are all these choices and I'm not going to do all of them. I'm going to try, I'm going to dabble, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and I'm going to say no, that's not for me, right? I think we have lost sense of the power of no and sort of not being afraid. It's not ashamed. You're not embarrassed. You're not even defensive. There's no guilt in saying no. Sometimes no is the most positive thing you can do. And I think to say to someone who's younger, it's a what if could be, and what if doesn't have to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's different for every person. And I think higher education lets you find like what that means for you. Where is your what if? And where is your line on saying, I don't want to know what that what if is. That's for someone else to be, and that's okay. And I'm good over here. But for someone else, I'm the what if going in this direction, right? There's no longer like you do one of three things and that's it. And you pick your one of three thing. The three is exponentially huge and changing and evolving as we go. If you had told me when I was a comms major in college a very long time ago that there would be a job called social media influencer, I would have laughed, right? It
Yeah.
would have sounded like the social media would have sounded like the biggest
What is this?
punchline,
Yeah.
right? And now I think, you have like elementary school students who on their, their little, what do I want to be when I grow up? They'll put, I want to be a social media influencer, right? I want to be on Twitch because they know what that means. The landscape is totally different. I think, today's college students are moving at light speed in a number of ways. And I think sometimes it's too daunting and they have to have the power and the confidence to say, I'm going to stop for a second and take that moment. And my what if may be different than the 2,000 other what ifs. And that's good. That's not
Yeah.
even an okay. That's a really good thing.
I mean, the what if answer can be, it's not a fit for me. Um,
Right.
and I have a niece that put the social media influencer on her little board this year. And my nephew started a YouTube channel. I am not clear what he's doing on the YouTube channel. It appears to be possibly playing video games or reacting to other videos. But at any rate, that job certainly did not exist when I started college in 1994. I want to pivot back to this sort of being outspoken as a higher education institution in this world that we live in right now. How do you sort of walk the line between being reactive to the things that are happening and being proactive with your messaging? It feels like Mount Holyoke is very proactive, but I'd love to hear how you walk that line.
I think we try to be proactive and we're also, realistic that sometimes your only option is to be reactive. We're not fortune tellers, right? I wish I had the crystal ball that tells me what's going to happen in a week or 2 weeks or 6 months. I don't. So, for all of our planning and trying to get ahead and sort of saying, okay, we're going to lead in this space. There are multiple times where we're responding, we're reacting, we're taking what's thrown at us or given to us and having to figure out how we sit and how we respond. I think again, it goes back to mission. It goes back to message discipline, right? If we start with what our mission is, that shapes everything. There are always times we turn up or turn down certain points, depending on audience, depending on tactic, but it's never a departure from that core messaging matrix, right? So is it always appropriate to, come storming out of the gates with gender diversity? No. If the topic, if the question, if the situation is about that, it's almost a distraction, right? We don't want to be performative and just use that as like hey, we're going to wave this flag every single time. It is a solid part of our DNA, right? The same as being a women's college. So if it's an attack on DEI, we're often going to bring up kind of who we are, and who we are is a gender diverse women's college. If the question is more about, a curriculum point, right? Or authority of, who comes in and makes like tenure decisions. That's not a place where gender diversity needs to come up, right? It would be like, why are we talking about this? What's the point in doing that? I think, in being reactive, though, when we are reactive, we're always still thinking about like, what's the greater message, right? It's never defensive. It can be reactive and not be defensive because we're not afraid of who we are. We're not embarrassed, right? We're not apologizing for it. We're also not changing it. So in that reaction, it's not okay, we have to shift all of this now to make sure that in that specific space, we're giving the answer that everybody else wants to hear, right? The answer is the answer. It's consistent, it's clear, it's often outspoken, and it lets us sort of stay true to, if we were proactive in that space, what would we say? Because if you look at a lot of how we respond to things, right? When President Hawley, our president, is quoted, what she says proactively and what she says reactively, pretty identical, right?
Mm.
We rarely will say, oh no, we don't defend as much as we promote and celebrate who we are. And in not having that defensive stance, it lets you take a proactive approach, even if you are having to be reactive in a moment. There's a reason we don't engage with trolls on social media. A lot of institutions try to comment back. We don't comment
Yep.
back. They can say whatever they want to say. Now, if something is offensive or it's like categorically untrue, we will sometimes message the person, especially if it's an alum or a student, and say, we just want to kind of clear up what seems to be a misunderstanding or a misconception. But part of our mission, right, is that everyone has that voice. And we don't shy away from dissension. We don't shy away from disagreement. So if somebody wants to make a comment, what I think is the part that I laugh a little bit is oftentimes our alums and our students will shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Right before
Yep.
we even have to worry about a comment, they're in there like, this is not true. And do you know that so-and-so happened in Mount Holyoke, right? So we sort of let it play out. If people want to question who we are, our values, what we believe in, I'm not going to tell them they're wrong because that's their choice. That's their right. We know who we are. We know what we believe. We also, this, you can't react to everything, right?
No.
You would drive yourself off a cliff if you
Yes.
tried to react to every situation, every request. We prioritize the ones that matter for the college. We prioritize, the safety of our community, the strength of our mission. And when we do have to react, we react in a way that reflects Mount Holyoke in every instance, even if it's not going to land right with everyone. That's okay. It will land right with the people who matter, and that's our community.
I love that so much. I used to say I'm not going to litigate things on social media. That's not the place to litigate. And had the same experience of students and alums coming up and sort of refuting things that weren't true, or, downvoting, the comments that they didn't like on Reddit or whatever. So I think that's really smart. I think you're never going to quash all the haters.
No.
And so, and I'm going to say something controversial here. I think like Taylor Swift has this long history of releasing diss tracks about her haters. Like, we all need to be a little more grown up than that. Like, can we just stop? I think that's a big part of the problem is it's like we're matching energy. We're doing an eye for an eye. I don't match energy. You can be a miserable, horrible person who's throwing garbage at me.
Right.
That's you. And I think, to your point, I think if you're attacking our students or saying things that are harmful or offensive about a particular, population or something, that's one thing. But if you feed the trolls, they come back. They want that rise.
It adds nothing to your own community, right? To your brand, to the strength of who you are. You're just firing back to fire back. And anyone who knows you, anyone who believes in your mission, your vision, your values, who believes in your institution, they know how you feel, right? I think what I love about when alums and students fire back is like, that is the truest demonstration of our mission, right? Of what we do, of why we do what we do. So, you have a 19, 20-year-old student who's commenting back to probably a stranger, not someone they know, because they so deeply love the college that they're at, that they're not going to let that comment go unnoticed. The college does not need to comment back. we stand by who we are. But those students, those alums, they're fiercely loyal in a beautiful way, and they will not let shenanigans happen on their watch, right? And sometimes the shenanigans come from them, right? We don't make them happy all the time. They have high expectations for us, and they will publicly call us out if they feel like we are not living up to of what Mount Holyoke needs to be. um, that may be a time to sort of pause and say, okay, should there be a message to students? Do we need to
Mhm.
clarify? Is it time for President Holly, to have a town hall with students, talk about the community, like what's going on? We don't air it on social media. Do we get along with them all the time? No community gets along with everyone all the time. Again, we, tell them to use their voices, and they use those voices. I think in terms of, the world at large, right, or the country at large, trying to question something we've done, a decision we've made, or not even something we've done, where we get pulled in the halo of what another college has done. We just don't have the interest in debating on social media and comments. It's not going to change anyone's mind. If it genuinely is someone in our community who has a concern, they're probably not going to reach out in a comment on Instagram,
Right.
right? They're going to
Exactly.
email the president. They're going to call
Yep.
someone. They're going to send a message and say, I don't understand what's happening here.
Mhm.
That is always a conversation and discussion we will have. It's intentional, right? It has goodness at its heart versus just like, I'm going to just get on there and fire off a bunch of things at a school I have no tie to. That's fine. Like,
Yeah.
we're move on. We're going to move on because we have better things to worry about.
I totally agree with that. I'm really curious about how you support your trans, non-binary, non-gender conforming students in a time when there is so much rhetoric that is diminishing who they are as people, so much hateful language. How are you supporting students with that type of scenario?
So I think, part of being at Mount Holyoke is knowing they're not just welcomed, like they're truly valued, right? Last year, 2024 was the 10-year anniversary of our inclusive admissions policy. So we had a thing called TGNC 10, Transgender Nonconforming 10, that was started by students. And it was kind of the theme for the year, right? It was a part of our opening convocation. We had a series of, speakers and lectures on campus throughout the year. We had an archival kind of historical exhibit in the library. We have students who are leading in that space. We have a current student who actually founded the National Transgender Leadership Conference. And so, our transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming students, they know that Mount Holyoke really is a place for them, not only because they're transgender, right? Like, they bring talents and gifts and they contribute to community in amazing ways. But it is a very safe and welcoming and inclusive community for students who, may not always be welcome in every other space, right? Um, Being LGBTQ friendly, that's a spectrum. That can mean a lot of different things. And we live it out in trying to recognize and celebrate that it's a difficult way to live and to be, right? And to feel like you're being questioned, and not seen and not valued, and that your actual existence is threatened in some of the spaces you go into. We work really hard to make sure that, their voices are heard. They know that they have resources, that they have a community that really wants them there and sees, the strength and beauty of who they are as people. And I think, in a political national landscape that really is daily bringing threats against them, that we are doing all we can to make sure that they are as safe, that they have the strongest support system around them, and that if they don't feel that they are safe, that they can come to us. We tell them how to lock down social media. We make sure they know to call safety and security if anything ever happens. We're really deliberate in using pronouns, and naming people and making sure that they're comfortable. And that's for all of our students, right? A student who, is super outspoken on campus may not want their full name on something that's going to be seen in the hometown paper, because the hometown paper and the hometown may not be as understanding. So we have a lot of open dialogue on, this is what this could mean, right? This video could be picked up somewhere else. This social media post, this website story will be public. Are you comfortable with that? And then most of our students will say yes. They're not ashamed. They're not afraid. And so sometimes we have to have some of those conversations, like, are you sure you're okay with your full name being promoted in this way? And I think, when it comes down to it, they know that Mount Holyoke is there for them, whether that's in the classroom, in a student organization, in a conversation with a alum career mentor who is also transgender and is now working and navigating what an employment space looks like. We're going to have those resources and keep adding to them, because as the threats increase, our commitment to our students has to increase.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up by asking you, what one piece of advice would you give to other chief marketing officers who really want to speak boldly, but are really afraid of the repercussions of that?
I think the one thing is just to realize that all of the chatter changes. You know, Trends come and go, administrations, politicians, even your own institutional leadership can change. And your reputation can't be based only on accomplishments and successes, right? Honestly, the biggest test reputation is in times of crisis and controversy. Is it strong and consistent enough to withstand scrutiny and pressure? Because if it's fickle and fluid, that answer may be no. And that's something you really have to have a gut check about, right? It's really easy in good times with high rankings, lots of social engagement, donors sending money to you, everyone being happy to be like, oh yeah, we have the best mission, we have great reputation. When those things turn on you, right? When there's adversity, when there's challenges, how do you stand up? Do you have the mission strength and the mission consistency to really withstand pressures? If the hits come flying, are you going to be okay because you're true to who you are and you can communicate that clearly? I think, for CMOs who want to speak up, I would kind of flippantly say, like, what's stopping you, right? If you can't speak up where you are, I'm going to ask you, do you belong where you are? Because most of us have really strong opinions and we're very confident. We're also really proud of the institutions we serve. If you don't have that pride and you don't have the support to, push your college forward, to push your university forward, maybe that's not where you belong anymore. If the institution is no longer one that you want to shout about from the rooftops, or you can't, right? If you're actually being kind of like told not to shout it from the rooftops, we are rarely fly below the radar people, right? CMOs, CCOs, VPs of Marcom. There's a reason we're in the jobs we're in. We're talkers, we're cheerleaders, we're hype people. And if your leadership or your institution or your board is asking you to kind of stay quiet, that's saying something about your mission. And I think you have to decide, again, are you going to be on the right side of history for that institution and for yourself? Because when everything shifts again, as it probably will, right? I mean, this is all ever changing. What do you stand for, and what did you believe in? Does your own mission align with the mission that you're serving? Because if it doesn't, if you have a disconnect between the institution you're serving and what you believe in, you're not going to be able to speak boldly. And I think that not being able to speak out is something that's a risk for all of us. We're all really smart people and we have a lot we could do for good. And if we're not allowed to do it for good, that probably scares me more than anything. Because if you silence the marketing communications people, that's messaging. And when messaging goes away, it all just splinters and falls apart. And then no one has any sense of why higher ed's important, because we won't be able to talk about it. I won't work for somewhere where I can't talk about it. It's just not who I am.
Yeah. No, and we talked before we started recording about how each of us has made decisions with our careers based on, whether we supported the values of the organization that we were being hired into or whatever. And I think, there's a lot of privilege in being able to make that choice. And to be able to say, I'm going to turn down this opportunity because it's not, I'm not values aligned with it. I remember talking to colleagues that were talking about how, like, everybody should be aligned with our mission. And I 100% agree. But sometimes you have people who just need a job and they're not going to quit the job
Right.
because they're not 100% aligned. And so that's how we end up with what I think is really important, really diverse campus communities. So I recognize the privilege in being able to make a decision about whether the values align with mine or not. But if you are in that position, I think the world needs those of us who can take a stand to take a stand, and take it even harder than or firmer than someone who is not able to for whatever reason.
There's other places you can speak boldly, right? So if you're in a situation where this is a job you need, it's a job that makes sense for you and your family, and you have an institution that maybe isn't as outspoken as you personally might be, volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, have a blog. There are very few institutions that will say you can't say anything ever, right? As
Mm-hmm.
long as you're not speaking truly on behalf of that institution, it doesn't mean that you can't volunteer and speak up and say what you want to say in other places. I think, at the heart of any marketing communications person is someone who just wants to be heard, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all want to be heard. And usually we want to be heard when we're promoting our institutions. Sometimes we want to be heard because there's something else entirely different to say. And I think that, if you feel like you can't speak up in the same way through your job, everyone will respect that. That doesn't mean you have to be quiet all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's up to each person, especially at a CMO level, to sort of, like, what's your line? What are you
Mm-hmm.
okay with, right? And I think if you really feel like you can't even speak up personally for something you believe in, that's take a hard look in the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
because at some point, right, that's a job that is negatively affecting kind of who you are as a person. And at a time when we need voices to speak up on both sides, on all sides, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
just on one side. I think a marketing communications person who feels like they can't speak up is a situation that you need to have a really hard look at, like, what you're doing, and if you're um, professionally and personally fulfilled in the way you need to be, because there are lots of ways to speak up. It doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that you're a Mount Holyoke and you're just, coming out bold and strong every single time. I would hate to think about a CMO who would feel that they really couldn't say anything except to toe party line with their institution, because that's someone who maybe isn't serving their institution's needs, right? Saying yes all the time or staying quiet isn't gonna necessarily be what's best for your college, and sometimes you have to be the one who's willing to say, "I disagree."
Mm-hmm.
And there's risk in that, but there's also a lot of strength and beauty in saying, "So what if? What if we did this instead? What if we said this instead? What if we were the ones who spoke up in this moment?"
I want to end there. If folks want to have a conversation with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, as most people knows. It's Jen Brock. You will find me with the Wizard Behind the Curtain and Mary Poppins mentality. You can find me at Mount Holyoke, which is mtholyoke.edu. Always open for a great conversation, a discussion, or even a disagreement if that's where we want to go.
I love it. And listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. You can also find me on my website, which is solvehighered.com. And you can find my book, which was kind of written in response to the attack on empathy in our culture right now, Heart Over Hype, Transforming Higher Ed Marketing with Empathy, at heartoverhypebook.com. I always enjoy hearing from you listeners, so please feel free to reach out. And until then, let's go bust some silos. Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and contact drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.